Those who need to make a journey on the trains, Thameslink services aren't running northbound between Blackfriars and St Pancras International. And on the Underground, there are minor delays on the Bakerloo line between Elephant and Castle and Queen's Park. On the motorways, one lane's closed on the M40 eastbound at Junction 7 at Maidstone, where a lorry's broken down. Also, for those who need to make a journey in Dulwich, Croxted Road is closed in both directions following an accident. It's closed between the South Circular Road and Turney Road, and there are delays on the approach.
This is LBC.
Avi's online security.
Ferrari now 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
I completely.
Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 minutes before 9, whatever else might have happened following the tragic death of Sarah Everard, what it does seem to have done is prompt some kind of resolve to look at the issues of violence against women and girls and to take action. And here to discuss that in more detail is Conservative MP and Crime and Policing Minister Kit Malthouse, who joins me now. Prior to getting into that, Mr Malthouse, does the Home Secretary retain confidence in Cressida Dick? Good morning.
She does. Good morning, Nick. She does, and so do I.
Why so, given the events of the weekend?
Well, obviously, the events of the weekend were extremely alarming and distressing, and I can understand why you and your listeners would be concerned about the footage that appeared. In the context, you will understand also that we placed the police in a very difficult position, asking them to do something during coronavirus in standing between us and a virus and protecting our health, which they've never done, and what is challenging for them over the last 10 months or so. But there's going to be an independent look at what happened on the night, and we'll hold fire on that. But alongside that, Cressida Dick is an officer of long standing with great skill and experience and knowledge to bring to this particular issue. And that's why she'll be attending the meeting with the Prime Minister this afternoon to talk about what more we can do to protect women in the public realm and in the private realm too.
And we really will get into that in a moment, Minister. Just on this, though, shouldn't the Commissioner have apologised?
Well, that's a matter for the Commissioner. I mean, as she said, that her officers are in a very difficult position. It's worth remembering that everything they did on Saturday night was focused on protecting people's health. Mass assemblies are...
half a dozen people arresting a woman in her mid-20s. How's that helping people?
As I say, Nick, that will be subject of an investigation.
Well, you told me it was helping people's health. Just explain how. So how does it take 6 police officers to arrest a 25-year-old slight woman? How is that helping everyone's health, Minister?
Well, as you know, Nick, and you might have seen, there have been a number of police officers out on the media explaining that the way they arrest people in those circumstances to guarantee their safety and to keep them, if you like, free of injury, is to use 4 or 5 police officers to make sure that they don't
handcuff them,
get
Minister?
hurt on the way.
And handcuff them?
As I say, this is a matter for the police. These are operational decision-making matters.
You support handcuffing that woman, do you?
Nick, as I say, the investigation over the next couple of weeks.
Kit, as I asked, do you support handcuffing that young woman?
So in arrest circumstances, there are police protocols that do require sometimes handcuffing.
And now, you agree? So that woman posed a risk, did she, to other officers or to herself, Mr. Malthouse?
Well, I don't know, Nick. As you know, an investigation will look at this issue. It's worth reiterating, and I know you understand this, but just for your listeners, that there is a very strong dividing line between operational decisions that police officers take in the moment and somebody like me who's a minister. My job is to set the broad strategy about what we do and to implement the laws, and it's then for the police to interpret that on the front line and make operational decisions. And the investigation will understand and illuminate what the decision making was during that protest during that event on Saturday night. Now it was obviously very challenging and very difficult and very distressing, and I can understand people's anger and concern.
But you're concerned as well, aren't you?
Oh, yes, of course we are. We're very concerned. The Prime Minister's concerned, Home Secretary is concerned, and I'm sure the Commissioner is concerned. That's why she's welcomed this transparency in this investigation.
Lastly on that, she's told us not to sit in our armchairs and be critics. Is that fair?
Well, you're asking me to...
well, you are the policing minister, Mr.
No,
Malthouse.
I understand. I can understand...
Is it right for the Commissioner to say that we shouldn't sit in our armchairs and criticise?
Look, I wasn't there on the night. I'm
not. You don't have to be, respectfully, Mr. Malthouse. Is it right for the Commissioner to tell us we should not sit in our armchairs and criticise?
I think it's right for the Commissioner to ask people to wait and appreciate the full circumstances that the police were facing before they form a view. And that's what the inquiry is designed to illuminate for all of us, Nick.
Now, let's talk about this task force. The most important issue is safety of girls and young women, and indeed all females, actually. What is this task force designed to do, Minister?
So I think this afternoon we're going to review the action that we've taken thus far on violence against women and girls, and then set a course for the new, refreshed, if you like, violence against women and girls strategy that will be published later this year. We've reopened in response to this awful, terrible crime, and we shouldn't forget the terrible tragedy that took place. We've reopened our call for evidence, if you like, and views. And over the last couple of days, we've had 64,000 people have come forward and given their views about where the strategy should go into the future. And we'll be designing those policies alongside things like the Domestic Abuse and Violence Bill, which is reaching the end of its passage through both houses at the moment. New bill we're introducing today that puts a serious violence duty on public sector bodies in a particular area to focus on this issue and bring strategies forward. We can always learn. And as you may remember, Nick, when the Prime Minister was Mayor of London and I was his Deputy Mayor for Policing, we actually published the first ever violence against women and girls strategy in the country, and in fact in a major global city, focusing on this issue in particular. And I can understand.
Well, this is what worries me. I remember those days when you were deputy mayor and the Prime Minister was mayor. And in those days, it was all about action. It was Operation Blunt. It was you and the mayor. It was going down. It was on the front line. It was working. It was taking knives off the street. Is the Prime Minister got a touch of the Theresas here? As in, we'll have a workforce, or we'll have a commission, or we'll have an inquiry. Where's the action, Minister?
No, it's not a talking shop, if you like, Nick. It is focused on action. And as I say, he wants to have a sense of what we have been doing over the last few months. So, for example, if you look at murder, where a third of all murders are domestic, more often than not male, perpetrated against a female, as Jess Phillips has highlighted every year in the country. Over the last year, I have been touring all the big six forces that have the largest murder numbers, talking to their chief constables about murder prevention strategies. And we're due to have a gathering of all of them, plus the national lead on murder and homicide, to look at what more we can do to drive these numbers down. You know, the numbers are on the turn, thankfully. It's early days, but it's much higher than it was back in the low in 2014. And so we are taking action to push that down. As I say, we've got legislation going through the House. I'm very hopeful about this serious violence duty. As you will know, Nick, it takes more than just the police to deal with violence in an area. So putting a duty on local authorities and health services to come together in an area and focus is absolutely critical. So there's lots of action, but there's always much more we can do.
It's interesting you mentioned Jess Phillips. Just to remind my listeners, of course, she's a prominent Labour MP and indeed Shadow Minister for Safeguarding. She writes a piece in the Daily Mirror today, Minister, in which she talks about the policing bill, as it knows, which starts its progress today. Does absolutely nothing to increase sentences for rapists, stalkers or those who batter, control and abuse women. It does nothing about street harassment and assaults. You'll get more for fly tipping than you can for stalking. Minister?
Well, I'm afraid that's not correct. So the bill, for example, specifically means that serious sexual offenders will spend longer in prison because we're removing the automatic release at the halfway point and moving it out to 2/3. And as I say, this new serious violence duty will make a big difference. It's a logical fallacy, and it's a game you can play to say, well, the sentence for X is this and for a sentence for Y is that, and that somehow denotes seriousness. You know, I have been, since I got this job from the Prime Minister, whatever it is, 18 months ago, he has absolutely focused me on violence in all its forms in our society, and that includes violence against women and girls. And we've been extremely assertive in pushing partners, including the Mayor of London and the Metropolitan Police, to focus in this area.
But is Jess Phillips right when she says under the Conservatives, rape convictions have fallen to an all-time low? Is she right there, Minister?
So we have seen a challenge with rape convictions.
So she is right then, isn't she?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, no, they have fallen very significantly over the last few years. That's for a variety of reasons, but that's exactly why we're on the verge of publishing an end-to-end rape review.
Here we go again. Another review, another task force, another. Meanwhile, the convictions are falling. This is not Mayor Johnson and Deputy Mayor Malthouse, is it? This is Nick, Prime Minister Johnson and Minister Malthouse, and we're not getting it. It's all talk, talk, talk.
No, it's not talk, Nick. These are extremely complicated issues, and we have to diagnose where the problem lies. Is the problem with the gathering of evidence? Is the problem with the handover from the police to the CPS? Is it all those things? And we've been working closely with women's groups and others and with the Victims Commissioner to understand the problem. Now, we could leap to conclusions at the start, but that is not a sensible way forward in what is a difficult problem. Now, on the way, we have put more money into support services for those who are victims of rape and sexual violence. We're rolling out more independent domestic violence and sexual violence advisors to support people as they go through the system. And there is loads that is being done, but these are complex and difficult problems. And before we get assertive on this, which we absolutely want to do, we need to diagnose them. Now, we are committed to driving up the number of cases on rape that get into court, and that is our laser-like focus, and you will see the strategy that draws everybody together. Now, that is a different approach, I agree with you, from running a city, when you have more direct levers. When you're in charge of a country and you've got police and crime commissioners and police and health service who need to be corralled, you have to have a proper plan, and that's what we're putting in place.
Let me ask you, you mentioned the city. We're having this conversation, Minister, because of the horrific events that took place in London, which are before the court. But can I ask you, is Mayor Sadiq Khan doing enough as regards protecting the citizens of London in your view?
So you're quite right that the mayor is primarily responsible for the safety of Londoners, and I would love to see him much more on the front foot. I know that the Met are doing a huge amount to deal with violence, and happily the numbers are falling. We've given them extra money and extra police officers, and in particular focused them in places like county lines. But on violence against women and girls, as I say, they will be big players in the steps that we take in the future.
And lastly, how do we reconcile this? The mayor has said that he's unhappy and unsatisfied with the explanation from Dame Cressida Dick as to events on Saturday, but you, your boss, the Home Secretary, and both your bosses, the Prime Minister, says that they keep confidence. How do you reconcile that?
Well, we do have confidence in her, but at the same time, as the Home Secretary said, there are questions to be answered about what happened on Saturday night. And that's why we've instituted this review, which seems fair to me. And to be fair to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, she's welcoming the transparency. I mean, what you want, Nick, from a police force is that willingness to be accountable and transparent to the people from whom they seek consent to police. And that is what we will try and achieve over the next couple of weeks as the Inspectorate investigates. You know, as I said to you before, the police are in an incredibly difficult position during this pandemic. They've had to focus on people's health in a way they haven't in the past. And we need to make sure the decision-making that they took on Saturday night
They
was
managed
right.
it. They managed it in Glasgow, though, didn't they, Kit? With
Well,
the Rangers.
exactly.
They didn't go wading into a load of football fans outside the Glasgow Rangers game, but a bunch of women protesting or complaining or holding a vigil, they go in as if it's like the terrorists. Kit
Well, that
Malthouse.
is exactly what we have to try and understand, right? And I totally, look, I completely understand people's concern. The footage was very, very distressing to lots of people, not least you, who's worked very closely with the police in the past.
Well, as have you.
Understands that, you know, vast majority of police officers are incredibly well motivated and do their job with integrity and honesty and sincerity.
Right.
And so we owe it to them to understand in detail what happened and what their interpretation of events was, and then learn the lessons that come out of it. Okay. But the critical thing for this, and I was very, you know, that young woman that was pictured in the photo said this, has said this in the media elsewhere, that she wants to move on to focusing on this really important issue of violence, right, and particular violence against women and girls, and the legacy of Sarah Everard and this appalling crime that's happened, this signal crime. You know, Nick, you will know that there are certain crimes that stick with you. And this is going to be one of those that certainly sticks with me, that is a moment of change. And that's what we want to see too.
Grateful for your time. Thanks, Minister. Policing and Crime Minister Kit Malthouse appearing here on LBC, where it's 3 minutes after 9. We'll go to News is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at